Welcome to CitizenGO Interviews. Today, we're privileged to have Gordon Chang, a renowned author and expert on China and North Korea, with an illustrious career spanning nearly 2 decades in Asia. Gordon brings a wealth of experience and insight. He is well known for his critical analysis and books on geopolitical dynamics of China and North Korea, including titles like The Great U.S.-China Tech War and Losing South Korea. His works such as Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, and The Coming Collapse of China have all sparked global conversations and debates. Gordon's voice echoes far beyond the written word because he contributes to top publications such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and shares his expertise as a regular columnist at Newsweek and The Hill. His thought leadership extends to prestigious speaking engagements at universities like Columbia and Harvard, institutions like the Brookings Institution, and briefings at key government agencies, including the CIA, State Department, and Pentagon. His insights are frequently sought after on major media networks, including CNN, Fox News, and CNBC. Today, Gordon lends us his expertise to discuss a deeply troubling issue: the Chinese forced organ harvesting industry. This topic is shadowed by complexity, controversy, and disbelief, requiring the depth of understanding that Gordon Chang offers. I am highly honored to welcome Gordon Chang to CitizenGO.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Yes. First, can you explain the basic premise of the CCP, forced organ harvesting industry, to those in our audience who may not even be aware?
I think China has three primary goals, the reason why they do this. Well, first of all, it's a big money spinner for hospitals, for provinces, and for the central government itself. But also, the second reason is that it's used to suppress dissidents. We got to remember that the formal name of the China Tribunal is the Independent Tribunal into the Forced Organ Harvesting from Prisoners of Conscience in China. And that tells us why they're doing this. And then also, this is part of China's genocide campaign against minorities in general. So you have those three reasons that I think principally drive this ghastly program, this crime against humanity.
Yeah, I have recently read that the numbers may be upwards to 100,000 a year now. Of course, the Uyghurs, which is a Muslim minority, and the Falun Gong are the top people that are being imprisoned. But I've also heard that Tibetans and house Christians are now being targeted as well. So analyzing the evidence laid out by the China Tribunal, as you mentioned, and other investigations, why do you think we're still debating the credibility of these accusations?
Part of it is because China does its best to suppress discussion of this. But this is so evil that it's hard for most people to fathom. Americans have a tough time dealing with evil in a post-religious world. And so these are the types of things that we say, well, that can't exist. Mm-hmm. And so there's that. And then also, a number of Americans actually benefit from this because they do get organs that they would not otherwise have access to. So there's a lot of reasons for this conspiracy of silence.
So do you think that journalists are doing enough to unveil the truth? I mean, a level of censorship, fear at play, or do you think it is simply a lack of public interest?
Well, right now, especially because we're in a presidential election cycle, people's interests are elsewhere. And when we talk about China, we talk about things like South China Sea or Taiwan, or tariffs and things like that. And so this is not really at the top of the list of things that we consider. So I think public interest is low on this. But if people started talking about this, I think that would generate interest because this is such a ghastly program. It is institutionalized evil. This is Third Reich type evil. But I do think people would actually start to pay attention, especially because, remember, right now, I think the American people are much more attuned to the true nature of the Communist Party, especially after COVID and fentanyl. These are things which have really put the nature of the party into spotlights for the American public. So I think that we're ready to have a conversation about this.
Yeah, well, you talk about the US, and you're an expert in the US China tech war that you've written about. So, what extent is Western technology, especially considering the advancements in DNA sequencing and storage, which is provided by US research? Can you explain that this is fueling the organ harvesting practices?
Well, there's been so much technical cooperation between the United States and other countries with regard to China in the medical field that, of course, they are able to use that technology to further, first of all, to preserve organs, to be able to find matches. This whole system is mechanized and industrialized. And that is with the help of Western technology, of course. So China learned a lot and applied it in evil ways.
Yeah, and in the same vein, what extent do Chinese transplant doctors that are trained not only in U.S. universities but all Western universities facilitate these gruesome acts? I mean, what responsibility do our educational institutions bear in this?
Yeah, I think that we know what's going on. The independent tribunal in 2019 documented this to a point where no one could deny what's going on, which means that we need to stop all medical cooperation, all technical cooperation with China, because as we just discussed, China is able to use this know-how in order to engage in this gruesome, evil practice.
So, despite that irrefutable evidence of these crimes, why do you think there is such a lack of action among policymakers and that awareness of the general public? You've already mentioned that. But the US government is proficient at condemning the CCP. I mean, just recently, the Congress heard more evidence. Three states, including Texas, Utah, and Idaho, have passed laws prohibiting insurance companies from paying for organs harvested in China. So we've seen legislation moves like Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act of 2023, which the Senate made no move on. And then this week, the House passed another bill, the Falun Gong Protection Act, with 17 Republican co-sponsors and only one Democrat. So in what way do you think the Senate will behave with this new legislation coming to them?
Well, the Senate so far has blocked a lot of House legislation across the board. And so I don't expect these bills to actually make it to the president's desk. And this is a shame. This is a shame on the part of the Senate because these are issues which go to the core of humanity, and we should be doing something about it. Right now, the Biden administration, they want to cooperate with China. They talk about managing competition. And they have, I think, an incorrect lens of looking at China because China wants to destroy the United States. And I don't see how we can cooperate with them. And we should have an administration that talks about these issues, that puts it before the American public and publics around the world. And it should make it a part of the policy that the United States will not establish or will not continue relations with a regime committing acts of evil of this, especially on an industrial scale. Representative Chris Smith, who is the chair of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, has talked about this continually, about the industrialization of murder. And we need to have those conversations. But I think the administration, and it's not just Democrats, it's also Republicans, just don't want to discuss this because this gets in their way of maintaining relationships, some of which are quite profitable personally for people in Washington.
Well, that's there's so much disparity there, and but this isn't just a U.S. issue. You mentioned earlier the international piece. So, as a legal expert, how do you see the role of international law in combating these atrocities?
We should be holding all senior members of the Communist Party. There should be an international criminal court. There should be Interpol red notices. The United States should be applying its law. And that means we should be making sure that if we can find a senior Chinese leader in a country, that he can be apprehended and brought to justice. Now, the world has done that with Vladimir Putin, um, but we haven't done this with Chinese leaders. But we need to understand that this is an evil regime. This is a regime that seeks on destroying the international order. And so this is an existential struggle. Now, unfortunately, that is not the way leaders in the US and other Western democracies or the other great democracies view this. But eventually, I think they will come to this view because the evidence cannot be refuted.
Well, so how do you think international law should not only hold China responsible, but the West, the nations that are complicit, accountable for the role that we play?
Well, in the United States, for instance, I think we should make it a crime to obtain an organ from China, either in China or elsewhere. It just should be a crime. It's conspiracy to commit murder, and it should be treated that way. And if we do that, we can cut off some of the flow of revenue to China. And that's not a full answer, but it's something that we can do right away. And as I mentioned, the United States should, look at the Chinese regime not as a competitor, as the Biden administration says, and not as an adversary. And by the way, Biden won't even call them an adversary, but they are an enemy, and we have to treat them as that. And if we do that, then we go after forced organ harvesting, genocide, murder, all the other crimes that the Communist Party is committing. It is, I know, not politically acceptable to talk about China in that way in the United States, but we have to confront facts. And when we confront facts, we can see that the regime is not just murderous, it is just evil. And we have to treat them the way we treated the Third Reich.
Well, so, we hear so much bad news all the time. So how can our grassroots CitizenGO international community lead in this fight at the international level to remove us from the supply and demand chain that we're experiencing? What can we do?
Well, you're doing a lot, and that is talking about this. And that's really where all of these starts, because you have to change the perception of the American people. And that is a long process, and it's not just forced organ harvesting, it's all the other crimes, as we've mentioned. But once we come to a correct view of the Chinese Communist Party, then that means that we will then be in a position where it becomes politically feasible, but also politically necessary to do these things. But we're not there yet.
Well, it's a combination of things, because we have the technology transfer, the medical ethics, the international policies, all intertwined with this organ harvesting industry. So, what practical measures can we do to sever Western complicity? I mean, the councils of the United Nations seem like that there's nothing happening there. So, as an individual person sitting here in my house, what voice can I raise to make a difference here?
Well, you can talk to your senators. You can talk to your congressperson about this, because there are things that we can criminalize. We can criminalize the obtaining of an organ from China. We can criminalize technical cooperation with China in the medical area. These are things that are within our power because it's our country to do that. As I mentioned, that is not politically realistic at this point, but it's like everything else. It takes a long time to change people's perceptions once they see the facts. Once we saw what China was doing with COVID, then that started to change people's view of the Communist Party. Now, we're not where we need to be yet, but the conversations that Americans today have about China are very different than they were at the beginning of this decade. And I think that as we continue to talk about these things, we will be moving to a correct view of the party. It takes time, and it's unfortunate it does, because people are dying right now, having their organs taken from them. But it's something that we have to do. It's just morally responsible. It is the morally correct path for us to do this. Forget about strategics, forget about politics. It is an issue of morality.
Yeah, well, in the world where moral compasses are spinning wildly, your insight is more crucial than ever. So can you give some closing thoughts to the Citizen Go, this grassroots worldwide family, as we stand to defend family life and freedom, specifically against the CCP, forced organ harvesting industry?
Most Americans, they don't think about this because it doesn't come up in their daily lives. But I can remember when I was practicing law in Hong Kong in the 1980s. And one of the persons I worked with was Chinese. And he told me that, he went to Shenzhen, which is the big Chinese city across the border from Hong Kong. And he was saying that in Shenzhen, they were gangs roaming the streets, taking people and forcing them into back alleys, cutting out their organs, and then letting them bleed to death. That is something that is stark. That is an image which I will never forget. And what we have to do is to make sure that Americans have that same image so that we understand what we're talking about. Because this is a crime against humanity. This is unthinkable. This is ghastly. This is gruesome. And we have to make sure that American policy is informed by what the Communist Party is doing.
Wow. Well, on behalf of the Citizen Go family, thank you so much for your insights and challenges today. Ladies and gentlemen, Gordon Chang.
Thank you, Anna.